Imagine you are on the world's largest, most luxurious ship ever built. Everyone calls it unsinkable. The newspapers praise it, the company swears by it, and even the captain believes it. But what if I told you Titanic's fate was not just the work of an iceberg? It was a chain of human errors, corporate greed, outdated laws, and missed opportunities, many of which you've probably never heard before. Today, let's uncover the lesser-known truths about why Titanic really sank. Most of us know about the iceberg, but very few talk about the other ship that could have saved hundreds of lives that night, the SS Californian. It was just 37 kilometers away from Titanic. 1 hour before the collision, its radio operator sent a warning, "Icebergs ahead. Proceed with caution." After sending the message, he switched off the radio for the night. The Californian had actually stopped in the ocean, waiting for daylight before moving again. When Titanic began firing distress flares after midnight, some Californian crew members spotted them. They even informed their captain, Stanley Lord. But here's the shocking part. Lord dismissed the flares, assuming they were part of a party happening on Titanic. Had the Californian reacted immediately, they could have reached Titanic in time to save hundreds of passengers. Instead, they remained still in the dark. By the time they switched their radio back on the next morning, Titanic was already gone, and all they found were floating bodies. Another controversial but fascinating detail is the steering wheel confusion. When the lookout spotted the iceberg and the officer ordered harder starboard, helmsman Robert Hitchens panicked. Back in 1912, ship steering commands worked differently. Harder starboard meant turning the wheel in the opposite direction from what modern sailors do. In the chaos, Hitchens reportedly turned the wheel the wrong way, directly towards the iceberg. By the time he realized his mistake and corrected course, it was too late. While historians still debate whether this actually happened, this theory adds yet another layer to the idea that human error, not just nature, doomed Titanic. Now here's something that makes the tragedy even harder to digest. On the very morning of April 14th, the day Titanic struck the iceberg, Captain Smith had scheduled a lifeboat safety drill. It would have been the first and only drill of the voyage, giving passengers and crew a chance to practice evacuation. But, believing the ship was perfectly safe, he cancelled it. When the real evacuation began later that night, there was total chaos. Passengers didn't know where to go, crew members didn't know how to load lifeboats efficiently, and precious minutes were lost. Joseph Bruce Ismay, the managing director of White Star Line, was aboard Titanic. Around 2 p.m. on the day of the disaster, Captain Smith received another iceberg warning. He showed it to Bruce Ismay, suggesting they might need to slow down. But Ismay took the message, folded it, and quietly put it in his pocket. Why? Because slowing down meant they would miss their goal of completing the maiden voyage in just 6 days, breaking a transatlantic speed record. Corporate pride was placed above passenger safety, and the ship maintained its speed of over 21 knots, even in dangerous waters. Here's something almost no one talks about. Titanic actually met all legal requirements for lifeboats at the time, but that's because the law was outdated. The regulations were based on the ship's tonnage, not the number of passengers, and since the rules hadn't been updated for years, Titanic was only required to carry 16 lifeboats, enough for about 1,200 people, even though there were over 2,200 people on board. This legal loophole was a ticking time bomb, and no one bothered to fix it until after the disaster. Much has been said about Titanic's double-bottom hull, which was supposed to make it unsinkable. But here's the catch. This double protection existed only on the bottom, not on the sides. When the iceberg scraped along the starboard side, it breached 6 watertight compartments, 2 more than the ship could handle. If the double hull had extended up the sides, Titanic might have stayed afloat long enough for help to arrive. The morning after the disaster, the Californian's crew turned their radio back on and were shocked to hear Titanic's SOS messages. They rushed to the scene, but it was too late. What they found was haunting: debris, wreckage, and the bodies of those who had frozen in the -2 degrees Celsius water. Some crew members later testified that the guilt of not acting sooner haunted them for the rest of their lives. When explorers finally found Titanic's wreck in 1985, it had been split into 2 pieces lying 600 meters apart on the ocean floor. Today, a newly discovered bacteria, Halomonas titanici, is slowly eating away at the metal, forming rusty icicle-like structures called rusticles. At the current rate, scientists believe Titanic will completely disappear by 2030. In other words, the world's most famous shipwreck is vanishing before our eyes. In 2012, an Australian billionaire announced he would build Titanic 2, a perfect replica of the original. Same design, same luxury, even the same route, but there was one major problem. The ship would have no TVs, no Wi-Fi, and no modern comforts to make it historically accurate. Investors began pulling out, delays piled up, and more than a decade later, the ship is still not built. The unsinkable Titanic 2 may have sunk before it ever touched water. The Titanic disaster wasn't just about an iceberg in the North Atlantic. It was about arrogance, outdated laws, ignored warnings, human mistakes, and missed chances. 110 years later, these hidden details still remind us, no matter how advanced we think we are, nature and human error can sink even the greatest of ships.